as they come in. So, all right. Welcome everyone to today's virtual field day, the Long Island Soil Health Virtual Field Day. This is the first time we're doing virtual, it's new for some of us, all of us maybe, but today we're gonna discuss cover crops, roots, and soil health. And my name is Debbie Aller, for those that do not know me. I am the Agricultural Stewardship Specialist with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County. I'm located in Riverhead, New York. And today we will also hear from Joseph Amsili, who's an Extension Associate with New York Soil Health, based up in Ithaca, New York. So just to orient everyone, those who have joined, everyone is currently muted with their video off. We're going to go through a few presentations, myself and Joseph, and then a little bit by Caitlin. And then we will have question and answer period for however long people have questions for. And then we'll make a couple of announcements, but there should be an option to raise your hand on the bottom bar of the Zoom account, or you can unmute yourself and talk as you have questions, or there's an option for a chat box, and you can enter your questions into the chat box, and then we will relay those to the individual to answer the question. So we're gonna get started because it's 5:34 right now. So just to start, I'm going to briefly give an overview of cover crops and discuss some of the work my group, the Agricultural Stewardship Program, has been doing on Long Island, mostly related to summer cover crop options. So just to start with what a cover crop is, I'm sure everyone on this call right now is aware of what a cover crop is. If you are not, it's a plant that's grown basically in between a period of when your cash crop is not growing. So typically when your fields would be bare and no cash crop would be growing. And they are grown mainly for the purposes of improving soil health, reducing erosion, controlling weeds, so you're reducing your weed seed bank in your fields, help control pests and diseases, and overall increase biodiversity, because there are many cover crops out there that help attract pollinators and just other beneficial insects. So there's a host of benefits to cropping systems by integrating cover crops into your rotation, whether it be as a summer cover crop, which we're going to discuss today, or an overwintering cover crop to protect your soil from water and wind erosion over the winter before a spring planting. Today, we're not going to talk mainly about terminating cover crops or the management around cover crops. However, if there are questions about that, we're happy to address them as best as we can during the Q&A period. So to start, I joined Cooperative Extension on Long Island in 2017, and my background is in soil science, and I've really always been interested in cover crops. So starting a couple years ago, I initiated initial summer cover crop demo. This wasn't a replicated trial. It was grown specifically for a field day, which some of you may have attended, just out of interest to see what cover crops grow and do well on Long Island. There's some very traditional cover crops that growers use, like sorghum Sudan grass and buckwheat, which I'll discuss. But then there's some newer ones coming up that are available for growers to use. And so how do these do on Long Island? So this demo was done at the Long Island Horticulture Research and Extension Center in Riverhead, New York, the Cornell facility. It was located in a field that had 2 different soil types. And strictly for demonstration purposes, we put a small amount of fertilizer pre-plant before we drilled the cover crop seed into the ground. And this was because we wanted to make sure we got good growth, good biomass for visual purposes of these cover crops. Most growers, the majority of growers, would not apply any form of fertilizer or nitrogen to a cover crop planting, because many cover crops are grown to actually scavenge for residual nitrogen in the soil. So these summer cover crops were planted in early July, except for buckwheat. We initially had poor germination in the buckwheat stand and had to replant that because we tried using older seed. So it was a clear demonstration of poor seed and needing high quality seed for good plantings. So just some of our, I need to reduce this, just generally what cover crops were planted and the drill rate we used. Typically the drill rate is lower than if you were going to broadcast seed cover crops, and then the corresponding depths we planted for each cover crop. So something like sorghum Sudan grass likes to be planted about 1/2 inch to 1 inch depth, whereas something like teff, which may be a cover crop many of you have not heard of, likes to be very close to the surface. Almost, it just needs good seed to soil contact, but does not like to be deeply planted in the ground. So just going to walk through briefly some of the summer cover crops that we planted and have been looking into. Sorghum Sudan grass, this is one that's a very commonly used by growers, for whether it be for a fallow field or a newly cleared field, or parts of a field that aren't going to be planted. Sorghum Sudan grass is very favorable because it's a heat tolerant summer cover crop that produces a lot of biomass. So if you're looking to build organic matter into the soil or get a large amount of residue that can be used to protect the soil as a mulch moving into the winter months, this is a great option, and it does very well on Long Island. It also has excellent weed suppression, which you'll see in another couple of slides. It often can be planted off with a legume crop like a cowpea or a field pea or some other nitrogen fixing cover crop, because sorghum Sudan grass is a grass, so it's a heavy nitrogen user. Sun hemp. I'm not sure if many people know what sun hemp is or have heard of sun hemp. It is a legume cover crop. It will form nodules on the roots. It produces a beautiful yellow flower, which you can see. I hope people can see. Oh, what's this remote control? Maybe I should use that. Whoops, sorry. Hopefully you can see my pointer, but these large yellow flowers that it produces later in the summer. It can help with soil nematode control, and it has a really beautiful architecture, as you can see from these images. I'm not going to talk too much about each of, sorry, there are people entering the waiting room. I apologize for this. Keep getting kicked off. Whoops. The next cover crop we looked at is pearl millet. This might also be a new one. For some folks, this is often used as a forage, a high quality forage for animals, but it can also be used as a cover crop, and it's largely used as a cover crop in other parts of the country. It's, again, a warm season cover crop. This is what it looked like last year in our trial. Another option we've done some work with one of my colleagues, Meg McGrath, who's with Cornell University in plant pathology, has used it a lot, is yellow mustard. This is a great cover crop for biofumigant purposes. Specifically, this variety I've mentioned here, Caliente Rojo, which has a lot of evidence that it controls soil-borne pathogens. So she's used this a lot with cucurbit plantings and other crops that are prone to soil-borne pathogen issues. And this is later in the summer what the flowers look like. This is very early growth, the different colors of that variety. Teff. So this is a summer cover crop that is very new to the United States that many of you might not have heard of. I first spoke about it last year during Plant Science Day at LIREC, and This is a staple grain crop in Ethiopia. Many of you might know or heard of teff flour, which is used in injera bread, if you've had Ethiopian food before. But so it's an extremely warm season, heat and drought tolerant cover crop. This is what the cover crop looked like last year in our demonstration trial. Excellent weed control. It was beautiful looking grass. There were really no weed pressure, no erosion there. This is what it has looked like earlier this year after we drilled it into our variety trial. Still quite good weed control. One thing we've noticed is it really doesn't like to be shaded. So in parts of the field that have shade, it doesn't grow as well and weeds may overtake it. But within open fields where you have a lot of direct sun, it grows very quickly and does very well in warm, dry conditions. Triticale, some of you may have heard of this. This is becoming more popular as a cover crop. This is actually not a very good summer cover crop, which we found out. It's more of a cool season crop. It can be both a grain crop or a cover crop. So triticale is the cross between wheat and rye, which people are much more familiar with. We did get some weed control by using it, but actually not a very good crop for the summer. Better to plant more around this time going into the fall as an overwintering cover crop. Buckwheat, another very, very common cover crop, particularly used by growers on Long Island. It grows extremely rapidly and great for weed suppression. It attracts beneficials if you're interested in getting more pollinators, bees, and other beneficials to your fields. It can be interseeded as well into plantings or planted along the edge of fields during a cash crop planting to attract pollinators. Although it doesn't produce much biomass like sorghum Sudan grass. So if you're really looking for that organic matter addition, it doesn't produce that biomass to really add that organic matter to the soil. The lower picture is comparing the height of buckwheat to myself, and I'm about 5'7", so it's about at my hip come flowering time, and that occurs about 35 to 40 days. So if you don't want it to reseed, you need to terminate it earlier on. Cowpea, this is another nitrogen fixing legume cover crop, good weed control, and erosion prevention, very similar to some of the other cover crops. So just some brief results. I don't want to bore you with figures, but these were some of the results from last year from that demonstration. And like I said, we did fertilize it a little bit. But this roughly is what you would see with other cover crops based on research that already has been done. The blue bar graph on the left-hand side with biomass, and this is in pounds per acre. Just giving you an idea of what produced the most biomass. So as is known and for a long time, the SS stands for sorghum Sudan grass. That produces the most biomass, and we found that here. The next, sun hemp, followed by teff, also produced more biomass than some of the other cover crops like buckwheat. You can see buckwheat really doesn't produce much biomass. Just some figures giving you an idea of what the carbon and nitrogen content is of each of these various cover crops. So something like sorghum Sudan grass, we get the most biomass out of it. It scavenges for nitrogen, so it doesn't have much nitrogen return to the soil, but you'll get a carbon return there. Now I'm moving on to this variety trial, this replicated trial we're doing currently in 2020. So this is ongoing, and I'm only gonna show some very preliminary results here. And so with this, I wanted to further expand on some of the cover crops we looked at just for demonstration in 2019 and see through a replicated trial how this works. So we have actually had 2 site locations here, one being that same Riverhead location of the Cornell facility, And we replicated it, not perfect replication, but some idea, about 20 miles, 25 miles away out in Southold area at the Charnews Farm, owned and operated by the Peconic Land Trust, who is a partner organization of us. And we've been working with them for many, many years, and in the past few years been doing a lot of cover crop work with them. So I just want to say thank you to one of Ag Stew technicians, Erin, who put this figure together and has been working hard on collecting the data for this trial. And here we're just giving you an idea of the differences in temperature and rainfall, which were two factors that are going to affect cover crop establishment and growth between these two locations. For everyone who's from Long Island or lives on Long Island now, you know, very short distances, you can have huge differences in weather and temperature. This is just a plot map of the experiment in Riverhead. What we did is we replicated it 4 times in 4 different blocks with a drive row in between, and each plot is 30 feet by 30 feet. We used a high diversity mix, which is the Raise Crazy summer mix from King's Agri-Seed. Sun hemp again, buckwheat, teff, sorghum Sudan grass, and cowpea. At Charnews, we replicated only 3 times, but in much larger plots. So each replicate here is half an acre. And this is in the Charnews field, which is part of their Farms to the Future program. So there are other farmers actually in these blocks that are white. So the same cover crops planted in Riverhead were planted also at the Charnews farm. Here, just an image at Lyrac, and here, so you can pretend like you're walking through the field. I hope everyone can see the video. This was me recently just walking through the replicated field at Lyrac. Someone please tell me if you can't see the video that I'm showing right now. If I don't hear anything, I assume you can. But this just gives you an idea of what it looks like. Some have video rolling, good. Okay, everyone can see it. Oh, sorry, I paused it. And you can see better weed control in some than others. We did discover after the planting that we did have one of the drop down gauges was actually clogged. So some of it wasn't seeded, but this is sun hemp we're going by right now, followed by, that's just a walk strip. And then we have the teff here. Obviously everyone knows it's been a pretty big drought year on Long Island. So even though these are drought tolerant cover crops, they do need water, some water to grow. And that one there is the high diversity mix, which has 7 different species in it. So that's just giving you an idea of what these cover crops are looking like. And these were planted early July. Okay, done. Yeah. So some of the data we're collecting on this variety trial, we're using an app called Canopeo. This is an app developed by Oklahoma State University. It can give us some idea of what the above ground biomass, it distinguishes green leaves versus the brown soil. So this, I'm just giving you an example, side-by-side image of buckwheat as it emerges, so we can get some idea of percent emergence. How much canopy cover are we getting quickly? So this is just an idea of one data point we are collecting. Some initial results, and this is an example picture of Erin collecting some above ground biomass from our teff plot. So just initially, this is percent weed presence. So here what you can see is sorghum Sudan grass is suppressing the most number of weeds. So we're getting the best weed control so far from the average of those 4 plots from sorghum Sudan grass. Whereas cowpea, we're not getting very much. And And this is, we're sampling 5 times within each of these 30 by 30 foot grids. And similar to getting the best weed control from sorghum Sudan grass, we're finding, like we knew, it produces the most biomass. So, and this is just dry weight biomass in grams. I didn't have a chance to convert it to pounds per acre, so I apologize about that, but it does give you an idea of which cover crops are producing the most biomass and which ones are giving the greatest weed control there. Same figures at Charnoes here, percent weed control, exact same figure out of 100 here, but on average biomass, actually overall, the scale here, if I go back, we're only at 40 grams over here, we're at 180. So the Charnoes site, we're actually getting much more biomass across all these cover crops. And that may be very well related to the temperature difference and the rainfall difference. So we're gonna explore that further. Like I said, these are very initial results just to give you some idea. Now, that was just a brief overview of some of the work we're doing, looking at different summer cover crops. And now I'm just going to touch upon a demonstration. I was hoping to show in person at a field day to everyone, but I'm going to try and give you an idea of what we did. And then Joseph, in his presentation, is going to talk about this further, because this was something, this was an idea I really liked from him, and he has some awesome pictures as well, but I'm going to give an introduction to this, this cover crop root tube demonstration we did. So once again, I give a shout out to technician Erin on this, because she built this stand and she planted and maintained all these cover crops so everyone can see. So we took the cover crops that we seeded out in the field and other cover crop seed we had, and we basically grew them in bags, in tubes, in potting media, starting 5 weeks prior to destructing them, to see what root growth are we getting. So it's very easy to see, and in the pictures I've showed and you've seen many times, we are aware of the above ground biomass. We see what's going on there, but we don't really have a handle, and we're just learning and starting to really explore more the roots, what's happening below ground. So here I'm just going to start giving you a visual of what some of the roots of these different cover crop species look like. And then Joseph's going to talk a lot more in depth about this based on some of the work some of the great work he did during his master's on roots. So like I said, we grew these cover crops in these bags. Sorry. We grew these cover crops in the bags. We didn't fertilize them at all. They were just watered regularly in the different tubes. And hopefully you can see the names up there written, the different cover crop varieties there. And we just took this photo last week after 5 weeks being in the tubes. I tried to capture a video of what it looked like once we cut the bags, and you can see initially some of the roots. I'm just walking down. We laid these all out on the greenhouse floor. In some cases, the soil just fell off right away from the plants, and on others, you can see it held together. So that's kind of what it looked like once we opened the bags. And then this is just a length picture of the different cover crops. The ones that haven't been destroyed, that's because the roots went all the way down to the bottom. And these columns, it was about 2.5 feet of almost 3 feet deep. This is a 36-inch measuring stick. So that gives you some idea. They're about 3 feet, 2.5 feet depth there. And you can see there's very big differences in root growth. across them. And here's Erin doing a great job holding them up. Here we're just comparing in her right hand on our left, the buckwheat followed by the sorghum Sudan grass. So the sorghum Sudan grass held the soil and that media together much more than the buckwheat did. Here we have a picture of sorghum Sudan grass root and pearl millet. On the left here is what the teff roots look like. So I showed a picture of what it looks like above ground, below ground. Maybe at most, in this case, we're getting about a foot down with some very fine roots from the cover crop. This is Dutch white clover, which many people try and plant in the spring or plant interseeded or within drive rows in a lot of fields. So here we're getting a bit more root growth from the clover than the teff. Buckwheat. Here's a video, and this is just how we separated the soil from the roots to give you an idea. We did not wash them. Erin's carefully removing the potting media mix from the roots. And this is of buckwheat. So as I said, this is the above ground buckwheat, what it looks like, beautiful with flowers, pollinators. Buckwheat has a very fibrous, fine root system. So you can see she's shaking off a lot of the soil from the roots. And the majority of the roots are up near the surface with buckwheat. However, as you see, as she pulls it up, you'll see there are fine roots and long roots that go, in this case, down to the very bottom of the tube, which, like I said, is about 3 feet deep. So she's about to pull it up after she shakes off some of the soil. There you go. So it's about, there are the majority of the roots on the surface, but you get some at depth, which really shows that these cover crops can penetrate down, especially if there are no issues with compaction here. So that's it for me. I went over time, and Joseph's going to be the main one, talking a lot more about roots, some great images. So there's my contact information for those who don't know me. That is my cell phone, since I'm often working remotely now. So please don't call me too late, although I will answer you as quickly as I can. And there's my email as well. So we'll save questions for the end. So right now I'm going to move